So today we are in my, or tonight I should say, we're in my Isopod corner. There's also some roaches and a scorpion box, but most of these are Isopods. As you can clearly see, I have a problem. But let's get to the point of this video, which is some people have asked me to detail how I care for Armadillidium maculatum, the zebra pillbug. Some people have been saying that they got some, like a small starter colony, and they haven't really gotten them to thrive or breed very much. So I'll see if maybe this can help. I'm not saying this is the best way to keep them. I'm just saying this is how I keep them, and it works well for me. I have a lot of isopods, so I think I know what I'm doing. Anyways, for enclosure size, that's really all up to you. It depends on how many you want, and a bunch of factors that are all up to you, how much space you have. But I'm a big fan personally of these tall shoe boxes from the Container Store. They're the same size as like your typical, I think this is 16 quart. They're like the same size as that, but taller. Twice as tall, maybe even a little bit more than twice as tall. But they allow for more substrate. I like to put at least 2.5, 3 inches of substrate for my isopods. The reason being is that it holds moisture for longer. It's very hard for it to dry out like that. Like if I go away for a weekend, I don't have to worry about it totally drying out and the poor little guys desiccating. Speaking of which, drying out, a lot of people ask me like what kind of humidity I keep or how I keep the substrate. For maculatum, all of the substrate is at least a little bit damp, or a little bit moist. One half is a lot moister than the other, but none of it is bone dry. Like these are my Porcellio ornatus, and they like it pretty much bone dry on one half. I don't keep maculatum like that. I know some people that do, but I do not. Temperature wise, a lot of people also say to keep them cooler. I haven't found that to be the case. I keep mine at around like 80 to 85 degrees. I think that's about optimum. Ventilation, some people say you need lots. I find that you don't really need it for that one. For these, like for these ornatus, the Spanish isopods, definitely. The Spanish Porcellio, they have a big open top. But for maculatum, I don't really find it necessary. So in a sec, we'll look inside, and I'll show you the components of the cage, what I put in the cage and stuff, and we'll take a look at the isopods. Okay. All right. So we'll get nice and up close and personal with the colony. Check it out. Okay. So substrate wise, I tell most people to use like a mostly soil mixture. Mine is organic topsoil, and the topsoil has like forest decompost, cocoa fiber, and worm castings in it. And then I mix that with peat moss, and then I take dry deciduous leaves, oak, maple, alder, poplar, loquat. I don't know if I said oak, but oak. Fruit trees are also okay. Like this is loquat. Most fruit trees are okay. You just want to make sure that the leaves are dry before you put them in. Magnolia is good. Magnolia, you want to do the same thing. You want to make sure that the leaves are completely dry. I take those leaves and I crush it up, like a lot of them, and I mix that with the substrate. Then what I also do is I take rotting oak wood. I'll show you what I mean. It doesn't have to specifically be oak, but you want some rotting hardwood in there. What I mean by rotting is like this stuff, like it crumbles apart in your hand. It's just been worn down, and I take that and I crumple it up, and I mix that into the substrate, and I put it on top too. I also take the fresh stuff. Like I have a friend who works with wood, and the fresh saw cuttings from those trees. Also put that in there, and that'll decompose, and they'll eat that too. Sometimes they'll eat it fresh as well. But yeah, that's really good for them. That's a very important part of their diet. The most important part of their diet is the leaves, and I think the wood. All the rest is more or less supplementary. But the supplementary stuff does have its benefits, and it helps a lot. So I'll talk about that. But first, I'll show you them. I'll try and find, I think there's a lot. I keep Magnolia seed pods in here. Yes, there's one. And there's usually a lot under here. So we'll check that out. Ah, yes. So keep in mind, guys, I started with 18 in November of 2017. It is now June 1st, going into June 2nd because it's late. And there's hundreds in here. Both these big guys and the little guys are probably hiding under a bigger piece of rotten wood or something. But yeah, they multiply very quickly for me like this. I've had great success with this setup. Supplementary Foods. Let me put this down real quick without hurting them. For Supplementary Foods, this stuff for Apache Morning Wood is good. It's a xylivore diet or detritus diet. It's mostly cellulose powder. It was originally made for wood-eating catfish, like the armored catfish, but it works very well for isopods, and they made a special little packaging just for isopods with, ironically, zebras on it. But they love that stuff. You can either sprinkle the powder in or mix it with water and make a gel and cut out the gel and give them the gel. Favorite foods like I find for them, butternut squash is like irresistible, so is sweet potato, but butternut squash pretty much takes the cake. These guys love their squash. They just went through a big piece the other day. These little sweet gum seed pods are nice too. The babies like to hide in there. And all this stuff they eventually break down into what is essentially just soil. But yeah. There's no shortage of them in here. And only a few short months. You know, it didn't take very long at all. But yeah, that's more or less it. They're one of my favorite pet species. I like these as pets. Some people use theirs as feeders or bioactive, but I like them just as pets. But that's pretty much it. These guys are really easy. They're a nice first pet, you know, more exotic isopod rather than like your typical vulgares or Nasatum. Oh, there's a bunch. So you look at that. This is rotting palm bark. They love to congregate on this. But yeah. Yeah, like I said, not necessarily the best way. There are different ways. But this is how I take care of them. If you have any questions on, you know, any specifics you'd like me to go over, I can. You can just type them out in the comments below. Or if you want me to do a care video on another type of isopod, I have like 20 different kinds. I can do care videos on those. But generally speaking, most isopods are cared for pretty much the same way. They're all more or less, you know, this type of setup. You know, the only difference really is varying levels of moisture and some like different like supplementary foods more. Like others like protein more, but these guys like plant matter more. Like they generally prefer like the woods and the leaves, and as treats they like vegetables and fruits rather than like scabers and like other Porcellio species. They generally like protein a lot more. But these guys are definitely more so searching plant matter. But they do enjoy the occasional protein. Like I feed them fish flakes, and they'll also process snake sheds. That's why they're also good for bioactive cages. They'll process sheds really well. Yeah, they're just really cool, you know. I like them a lot. They're definitely a must-have for anybody who keeps isopods. I recommend them a lot. So yeah, like, comment, share, subscribe. This has been Heretic Nature and our little care video of Armadillidium maculatum, the zebra pillbug. So have a good night, guys.